weren't what they thought we were. And we began seeing that they weren't what we thought they were. And being Marines was kind of a melting pot. And we all got together. It's like a mini United States, you know, where you got Jews, you got Italians, you got Indians, and they all learn to live together. The Latinos have a culture just as the Japanese had, you know, their own form of Bushido code, which is not as extreme, but certainly is just as firm in their nature. And that's that. They want to prove that they're up to whatever job is given to them. And they want to show that they're as patriotic as anybody, as some blue-eyed blonde guy.
Lansford soon heard about the 2nd Raider Battalion, an elite commando unit, and decided to volunteer. Its commander, Lieutenant Colonel Evans F. Carlson, was a minister's son with a crusader's zeal. Carlson's motto was gung-ho, Chinese, for work together. Officers were called by their first names and lived just as their men did. Decisions were made collectively, by consensus.
Colonel Carlson was a visionary. And he understood guerrilla warfare perfectly. He had made a lifelong study of it. And I think his hero was Lawrence of Arabia.
Carlson's second in command was the oldest son of the President of the United States, James Roosevelt.
I think he may have been nearsighted, and he had to wear special shoes. But he certainly never asked and never got any special treatment.
He used to stand in line with the rest of the troops. When we went to eat, he stand in line with these utensils and stuff like that, and he was just another guy as far as I was concerned.
Also serving with the Raiders was a farmer's son from Los Angeles County, Pete Arias of C Company, who had joined up to get away from home. Within hours of landing on Guadalcanal, the Raiders moved into the jungle, already on the hunt. Their objective was to terrify and bewilder the enemy, mounting surprise attacks from the rear, then melting away again, living off the land.
The Japanese had never been defeated. You know, they had defeated the Russians in 1904, and from that time on, they had been considered the finest jungle troops and light troops. They had a sense of being superior. They held the American soldiers in contempt. They thought we were a bunch of softies. They thought that we could not make the sacrifices that the Japanese could. The Bushido Code and all that stuff. And that superiority on the part of the Japanese is one of the things that defeated them. Because the last thing they expected was any Americans to be behind their lines. And they couldn't believe it. And in the beginning, they thought we were just small patrols that had bumped into them. They didn't realize they were up against an organized force. And we couldn't take them on, you know, face to face. You know, there were too many of them. So we kept hitting their flanks and hitting their rear end and attacking them where they thought we weren't going to be and chopping away at them. And it was just that simple. It was like chopping pieces of an animal until the animal died.
Most of the fighting was brief, violent, and at close quarters. Sometimes, just a few feet separated the Americans from the enemy.
The raiders were in there. We was in there to take care of people. You know, if we ran into them, we'd take care of them, and that's the way it was. But there was a lot of that, though. We used to run into them every other day. Well, they used to tell us that the Japanese couldn't see very far. But they could see far enough to kill you.
One day, Pete Arias and his squad were ordered to cross a clearing on the outskirts of a deserted village.
My corporal, he was our squad leader. He says, I don't think we ought to go across that field. So here comes the captain. He says, the company commander, he says, hey, what's the holdup? And this squad leader might says, hey, Cap, he said, I don't think we ought to cross this field. And the captain says, oh, go ahead. This machine gun opened up right in front of us. They wiped out my squad. My platoon leader, he said, move your squad. I says, I ain't got no squad. We lost a lot of people there.
In the fighting that followed, some of the raiders were captured, then tortured and mutilated.
And we could hear them, you know, crying out while they were being tortured. And the following day after the battle, and after we discovered our raider guys staked to the ground and you know, in effect, tortured, cut up. We had captured, I think, 5 guys. When we were assembled there after the battle, Carlson said, did anybody lose a good friend in the battle yesterday? And some guys raised their hands. And then he said, okay, take these guys out and do what you have to do. So some of the guys took them out and killed them. Just took them in a jungle and shot them. We were supposed to be good guys, and there were no reporters with us. So the word never got out until much later that had happened. And some people still deny it, but I was there, and I'm telling you that we did it.
What came to be called the Long Patrol went on for 30 brutal days. Carlson's raiders lost 34 men, but they killed almost 500 Japanese. A few months later, the American guerrillas would fight again in the Solomon Islands, this time on Bougainville.
Bougainville was the worst place I've ever been. If there really is a hell, I mean, it's got to be like Bougainville. It's just the island was a pile of pestilence. One night we were moving into a position up the Piva Trail, and it was very dark. I mean, you literally couldn't see your hand in front of your face. We were moving in there, and I had a machine gun, and my assistant gunner and I set up the gun. And we didn't know where we were, we didn't know where the enemy was, except that he was supposed to be right in front of us. And as we were setting up the gun, we heard a shot, just one shot. And I heard a guy go, you know, he like caught his breath. And, you know, we lay there for a long time. Then we began to hear this guy moaning. The moans became louder, and then he became delirious, and then he began to call for his mother. I thought that was only in the movies, but it isn't. It was a terrible night, and then, you know, we were trying to sleep, and we couldn't. And I began thinking, Jesus Christ, why don't you die, God damn it? You know, we got to sleep. You know, your mind gets crazy after a while under those conditions. And he continued to moan, and until near morning when he died. When it was daylight, we were told to withdraw from there. And they had this guy in a poncho, and they were dropping him into one of the holes that the people in the back had dug. And I said, "Who is the guy?" He told me the name of the guy, and it was, you know, my best friend. And he had been about 3 or 4 guys away from me, and it was an accidental discharge. Somebody had accidentally fired a shot as he hit the deck, and the rifle butt hit the deck, and he fired. And it was the only shot fired that night, and it killed him. And, you know, I just, you know, I felt like hell. I really felt that. Because of hearing him and the guilt feeling, you know, that I kept saying, "Why don't you die, for Christ's sakes?" And the other guys told me that they felt the same way. We were so tired, we just wanted to sleep. When you wish a guy dead and it turns out to be your best friend, you know, it's the pits.
Next time on The War. Fresh troops are tested in North Africa.
Over here, we all know it. The worst is yet to come.
As America redefines freedom.
I'm going into combat with my folks behind barbed wire.
And the skies take their toll.
If you met a guy and bought him a beer, tomorrow he would be gone.
In part 2 of The War.
To learn more about the war, visit pbs.org. To order The War on DVD with additional features, the companion book with over 400 photos and illustrations, and the CD soundtrack featuring music from the series, call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.